The effects of whole body compression garments on prolonged high intensity intermittent exercise. Sports Performance and Development National Talent Identification and Development Program, Australia Sports Commission, Adelaide, South Australia. Department of Health and Human Performance, Central Queensland University, Rockhampton, Queensland, Australia. Department of Sport, Exercise and Health, University of Hull, United Kingdom, and School of Environmental and Life Sciences, University of Newcastle, Quimba, New South Wales, Australia. Skipping the abstract. Introduction. Field-based team sports incorporate a unique activity profile of prolonged high-intensity intermittent exercise, PHIIE, that imposes specific physiological demands on athletes. Team sport-specific PHIIE consists of repetitive bouts of high-intensity exercise, HIAs, e.g. fast running, sprinting, interspersed with periods of low-intensity activity, LIA, walking, jogging, which places high metabolic demand on both the aerobic and anaerobic energy systems. For example, soccer players have been observed to complete an HIA every 30 seconds during a match, whereas the LIA and HIA time ratio of their match play is approximately 12-1. Similarly, hockey players carry out an HIA every 27 seconds with an LIA-HIA ratio of approximately 10-1. Further, team sport athletics are typically repeated to maintain average heart rate, HRs, between 155 and 170 beats per minute, and blood-lactate concentrations, BLA, of between 4 and 8 millimoles per liter. These high physiological intensities, in combination with tactical and nutritional considerations, may help explain the reported decline in physical performance and sprinting ability across a match. Team sport physical performance, i.e. distance covered, has previously been related to several physiological capacities: quality of play, maintenance of HIA, and repeated sprint ability. Investigators have suggested that either reducing the physiological demands or increasing the distance covered during a PHIIE may improve factors related to field-based team sport performance. Team sport athletes may benefit from improving the total distance covered and the frequency of HIA across a match that may allow superior tactical positioning, in turn, that hypothesized to enable more advantageous personal performance and team scoring opportunities. Previously, wearing compression garments has been reported to ergonomically aid performance and recover across athletic populations. Past studies have suggested wearing CGs reduce muscle oscillation and venous blood pooling. In addition, investigators have identified that wearing CGs accelerated metabolic recovery after anaerobic exercise and improves exercise efficiency, anaerobic threshold, and muscle oxygenation responses. Such benefits are primarily attributed to the circulatory benefits associated with wearing CGs, including improvements in venous return and subsequent increase in stroke volume and cardiac output. To date, limited data exists on the effects of wearing CGs on the physical performance and physiological responses during intermittent exercise. Original data from Duffield and Portis compared 3 brands of whole-body compression garments, WBCGs, on selected physiological and performance measures during a 30-second exercise protocol comprised of repeated 20-minute sprint interspeed with LIAs. No significant improvement was observed in mean sprint time, fatigue decrement, and distance covered in any WBCG brand compared with the control condition. In addition, no effect was observed in the physiological intensities during the intermittent protocol in any WBCG condition. However, the significant increase was reported in skin temperature in all WBCG conditions, suggesting that the garments were responsible for some thermoregulatory effects during the intermittent exercise protocol. Similarly, Horton et al. Completed an investigation detailing the thermoregulatory and performance effects of wearing short sleeve and leg WBCGs across the Loughborough intermittent shuttle test. The investigators reported that although wearing the WBCGs did not benefit physical performance nor significantly elevate core temperature, a significant increase in skin temperature was observed between the two conditions. Therefore, wearing CGs may have some thermoregulatory effect, although this may be on peripheral musculature. A further study from Higgins and Associates identified no significant performance or physiological effects on lower body CGs during field-based netball simulation in comparison with placebo and control conditions. However, this study did identify a large effect size observation in distance covered at HIA speeds in the CG condition. Interesting, although the wearing of CGs offered limited performance benefits in previous research, the intermittent protocols implemented during these studies may not have validly represented the frequency of HIA reported for team sport-specific PHIIEs. Pardon me. Given the previously reported anaerobic and circulatory benefits of CGs, along with the observation that CGs may increase distance covered during HIAs within intermittent exercise, it may be hypothesized that the benefits of wearing WB CGs may be more pronounced with the higher frequencies of HIAs. Thus, the purpose of the current study was to determine the effects of wearing WB CGs on selected physical and physiological measures during a team sport-specific PHIIE protocol. Methods. Experimental approach to the problem. Several manufacturers claim that wearing CGs will improve performance during team sport-specific PHIIEs, with limited empirical evidence being available within the scientific literature. However, there are presently no data examining the effects of wearing WB CGs on controlled team sport-specific PHIIEs that validly represents match play within a controlled environment. This study attempts to examine the performance and physiological effects of wearing WB CGs on team sport specific PHIIEs using a laboratory-based simulation on a non-motorized treadmill. Each subject completed the 45-minute PHIIE protocol, which has previously been developed using several time motion analysis studies of team sport match play in randomly assigned WBCG and control conditions. During the protocol, physical performance measures of total distance, velocity-specific distance, and HIA speeds were analyzed because of their relationship with team sports performance. Selected physiological measures including HR, VO2, blood-lactate, and tissue oxygenation index (TOI), tissue hemoglobin index, and THI were recorded and analyzed to explain any performance effects of WBCGs based on the findings of previously studied examining the effects of wearing WBCGs. It was hypothesized that wearing WBCGs would enhance PHIIE performance and provide significant physiological benefits. Subjects: 8 male team sport athletes, age 20.6 plus or minus 1.2 years, body mass 72.9 plus or minus 5.8 kilograms, body fat 10.1 plus or minus 2%, and VO2 max 57.5 plus or minus 3.7 milliliters per kg per minute, volunteered to participate in the current study. This sample size was proposed by Sirotic and Coates, who suggested that between 5 and 9 subjects would be required to detect a 10% change in the majority of physiological and performance variables across a similar non-motorized intermittent protocol. All subjects were competitive for a minimum of 3 years before testing, which occurred during the middle of the competitive season after 2 to 4 months of sport-specific phase and pre-competition training. All subjects trained for 2 hours 3 times a week while also competing in 1 weekly match. Before participating, subjects were informed of the experimental risks and provided written informed consent. All subjects were also screened for medical contraindications that may have excluded them from participation. Ethical approval for the research was granted by a University Human Ethics Committee. Whole body compression garments. The WBCGs used in the present study were unisex full-length bottoms and long-sleeves tops. Sports skins. Classic Skins trademark, Campbellton NSW, Australia, which comprised of 76% nylon and merrill microfiber and 24% Roca spandex. Each WBCG was fit according to the manufacturer's guidelines using each subject's stature and body mass. The lower body CG ran from the superior aspect of the medial malleolus of the ankle to fractionally superior of the iliac crest. The upper body CG covered the whole torso and ran to the radiocarpal joint of both arms. A Kikihime pressure monitor, TT, Meditrack Denmark, measured the compression of the WBC at several locations. Figure 1. The control condition consisted of wearing regular running shorts and loose playing shirt, typical of that worn by soccer players. Procedures. Initially, all subjects completed a 15-minute familiarization run on the non-motorized treadmill, NMT, Trimp Model Woodway, Waukesha, Wisconsin, USA. In a separate session, subjects completed a 10-second familiarization session that was followed by an assessment of peak sprint speed, PSS. The PSS was measured to determine the target speeds for which movement category defined in the PHIIE protocol. 10 minutes after the completion of the PSS test, subjects completed a discontinuous incremental test to exhaustion to determine VO2 max. After this, on 2 separate occasions, subjects returned to the laboratory to complete a 45-minute PHIIE protocol in randomly assigned control WBCG conditions. Before each session, subjects were instructed not to undertake any high-intensity exercise for 24 hours and not to consume food or drink liquids containing caffeine for 2 hours before each testing session. All subjects were given a minimum of 72 hours rest between the testing sessions. Subjects completed a dietary record sheet before the first testing session, which was photocopied and returned to the subject to be replicated before the subsequent testing sessions. All tests were completed within the standardized laboratory conditions at 22 plus or minus 2 degrees Celsius and less than 70% relative humidity, and at the same time of day to avoid circadian variances. Participants completed all exercise testing on the NMT wearing regular running footwear. Assessment of peak sprint speed. Before the assessment of PSS, subjects completed a warm-up consisting of 10 minutes of jogging and then 5 minutes of dynamic stretching. To minimize inter-subject variability, subjects were assessed for their individual PSS, and the target speeds for each movement category for the PHIIE protocol remained relative to their maximum speeds. Each subject completed 3 maximum 3-second sprints that were separated by 2 minutes of jogging. Peak sprint speed was taken as the highest speed recorded during any 3-second sprint. Assessment of maximum oxygen uptake. After PSS assessment, each subject completed an incremental run to exhaustion to determine VO2 max in the control condition. The test commenced at the speed of 8 kilometers an hour and increased by 2 kilometers an hour every 3 minutes until blood lactate of 4 millimoles was reached. Each stage was separated by a minute rest to allow for capillary blood sampling. Once a blood lactate of 4 millimoles was reached, the subjects ran continuously with their speed increasing half a kilometer an hour every minute until volitional fatigue or VO2 max was attained. Determination of VO2 max involved the observation of any of the 2 following criteria. A. Volitional exhaustion. B. A respiratory exchange ratio or that greater of 1.15. A plateau in oxygen, or C. A plateau in oxygen consumption increase less than 2 millimoles per kg per minute despite an increase in workload. And D. Attainment of H predicted maximum heart rate 220 minus age. VO2 max was defined as the highest 30-second average observed during the incremental test. Prolonged high-intensity increment exercise protocol. The 45-minute PHIIE protocol was based on several time motion analysis studies of team sport match play and had previously been reported. The protocol consisted of 3 repetitions of 15-minute activity profile that incorporated 6 individual running speeds: standing 0% maximum speed PSS, walking 20% PSS, jogging 35 PSS, running 50 PSS, fast running 70% PSS, and sprinting 100% PSS. The final 2 minutes of each 15-minute period included a series of self-selected high-intensity runs, variable runs, during which each subject was instructed to cover as much distance as possible across the interval without sprinting. Walking, jogging, and running were classified as LIA, whereas fast running, sprinting, and variable runs were HIA. A graphical representation of the protocol is given here in Figure 2. Before commencing the PHIIE protocol, subjects completed a 15-minute warm-up, which consisted of 5 minutes of jogging, dynamic stretching, and then a series of high-intensity activities which included at least 2 6-second sprints. During the protocol, subjects were attached to a wall with a tethered belt and was adjusted to allow maximum stride length during sprinting. Subjects were requested to follow specific target speeds as close as possible throughout the protocol. A computer monitor was placed at eye level that displayed both target speed and actual speed of the treadmill belt. A custom-written LabVIEW protocol, National Instruments, Austin, Texas, USA, provided audible commands and displayed target speeds for each activity mode. Before each change in speed, 3 audible tones were played. Protocols both target. 3 variable audible tones were played, which was followed by an audible command to inform the subjects of the upcoming activity. For example, if the participant was walking and the next speed was a run, the audio sequence beeped, 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 run would be heard. When the run instruction occurred, the target speed on the monitor changed to the corresponding speed. During a variable run, the monitor displayed 999, and subjects were instructed to run as fast as possible without sprinting. During sprinting, subjects were instructed to simply sprint as fast as possible regardless of the target speed. Treadmill running belt velocity and distance were measured using a reflective object sensor, Optec OPEB 608B, Opter Technology, Carrollton, Texas, USA. All measures of velocity and distance were collected at the sampling rate of 10 Hz and averaged every second using custom-written LabVIEW software, National Instruments. Reliability trials of the total distance covered and maximum sprint speed during the PHIIE protocol were acceptable. Distance covered, 10% equals 2.3. Maximum sprint speed, technical error of measurement, percentage is 4. Physiological measures. Physiological measures. Blood-lactate concentration. Blood-lactate concentration was determined from capillary blood samples drawn from the hyperemic fingertips. Samples were analyzed using an AccuSport portable lactate analyzer. Boehringer, Mannheim, Germany. Capillary blood samples were taken during a minute rest period and at completion of the incremental test during the PHIIE protocol. Blood lactate samples were taken at the 13th, 26th, and 39th minutes. Heart rate. Heart rate was continually recorded at 5-second intervals during the exercise testing using a Polar S610i HR monitor, Polar Electro Oy, Finland. After testing, HR data were downloaded to a personal computer for analysis using Polar Precision Performance Software, Volume 4.0 Polar Electro. Expired gas. Expired gas measures were continuously measured across the incremental test and for repeated 5-minute periods that commenced at the 13th and 23rd minute of the PHIIE protocol. Expired gas analysis was performed using True 1 trademark 2400 metabolic measures systems, Cargo Medics, Sandy, Utah, USA. Subjects wore a headpiece containing a mouthpiece and a flow meter along with a nose clip during the respiratory gas testing. Cargo Medics restricted. Before each test, the flow meter was calibrated with a 3-liter syringe. Hands Rudolph Incorporated, Shawnee, Kansas, USA. And the analyzers were calibrated against gases known concentrations, reference 21.2% oxygen, calibration 12.1, plus or minus 0.02% O2, 5.05, plus or minus 0.1% CO2, according to the manufacturer's instructions. Real-time display of gas concentrations and flow measures for each test was performed and displayed using a personal computer. Near-infrared spectrometry. Local measures of muscle oxygenation from the V lateralis muscle were continuously monitored using a NIRO 200 near-infrared spectrometry NIRS systems. Hamatsu Photonics, Hamamatsu City, Japan. The NIRS probe consisted of 2 laser diodes that directed at 4 different wavelengths, 775, 810, 850, and 910 nm into a working muscle. The use of the NIRO 200 has been previously documented. The NIRS system provided measures of changes in hemoglobin, HB, oxyhemoglobin, HbO2, tissue oxygenation index, TOI, HbO2 divided by HB, and tissue hemoglobin index, Before the application of the NIRS assembly, the application area was shaved to remove excess hair and covered with clear plastic to ensure that sweat and oils did not disturb the optode sensitivity. The probe was placed 14 centimeters superior to the border of the patella on the left leg over the belly of the V lateralis. The optodes were placed in a dark plastic holder, which maintained their position of fixation to each other. The interoptode spacing was maintained at 4 centimeters throughout all testing. Optode assembly was secured to the skin with tape covered with a dark cloth and secured to the thigh using an elastic bandage. This provided free movement while restricting the NRS assembly from large movement artifacts and any reductions in incidental light interference. All leads from the NRS were secured using tape to further reduce any movement artifact. Before each test, the subject was instructed to stand stationary while the NRS signal was manually zeroed to ensure changes in muscle oxygenation measures were relative to rest. This was performed after the subject was standing for at least 30 seconds. Measures of TOH, TOI, and NTHI were continually recorded across the PHIIE protocol. The THI is the tissue hemoglobin index. Statistical analysis. Means and SDs were calculated for all descriptive, physiological, and performance measures. A greenhouse geyser adjustment was used to ensure sphericity of all measures and reduce the likelihood of type 1 error. Paired sample t-tests were used to determine significant conditional differences in total distance covered and distance covered in LIAs and HIAs during the PHIIE protocol. Furthermore, a 2 condition times 3 time repeated measure analysis of variance was used to examine the changes in speed, measurements, and physiological characteristics across the 3 15-minute repetition. All paramedic statistical analysis were performed using statistical package for social sciences software, SPSS Incorporated, Chicago, Illinois, USA. Statistical significance was accepted at p as less than or equal to 0.05. After this, magnitude-based inferences were used to identify practical differences in the performances and physiological responses between conditions. This method computes the chance that the true effects are substantial when a value for the smallest worthwhile change is entered. The magnitude of the observed differences across conditions was quantified using effect size statistics and squared, whereas 0.6, 1.2, and 2.0 were representative of moderate, large, and very large effects respectively. Coincidence limits for the true mean values were estimated with the unequal variances statistic computed between the control and WBCG conditions. The likelihood of the true effects was practically beneficial, neutral, or detrimental for the smallest worthwhile change. If the likelihood of benefit and detriment were both larger than 5%, then the true effect was considered unclear. If the likelihood of benefit and detriment were equal to or less than 5%, quantitative probabilities of their practical significance were assessed qualitatively as previously used. The smallest worthwhile change for the performance variables of interest was approximately equal to the TE of the PHIIE protocol that was used. The smallest worthwhile change for the physiological variables investigated were calculated to 1/5 of the between subject SD for each condition. All magnitude-based inferences were performed using Microsoft Excel, Microsoft Corporation, PM, Redmond, Washington, USA. Results. Distance covered. The distance covered during the LIA and HIA movement categories, along with the total distance covered in the ground and WBCG conditions, are displayed in Figure 3. The total distance covered was likely to be practically greater, 88, 10, 2%, n squared equals 0.6 in the WBCG condition, 5.88 plus or minus 0.64 kilometers than in the control condition, 5.42 plus or minus 0.63 kilometers. A likely practical increase was also observed in distance covered during the LIA movements in the WBCG condition, 4.58 plus or minus 0.57 kilometers compared with the control condition, 4.21 plus or minus 0.51 kilometers. Speed. The mean speeds of each HIA movement category across the PHIIE protocol for each condition are given in Table 1. The mean variable run speed was observed to be likely greater in the WBCG condition, 19.7 plus or minus 1.5 kilometers an hour, when compared with the control condition, 18.4 plus or minus 2.4 kilometers per hour. Physiological measures. The mean physiological response across the PHIIE protocol are displayed in Table 2. A significant effect of time was observed for mean HR and post-sprint TOI across the repeated 15-minute periods. Further, there was significant interaction between the condition and time for HR. Magnitude-based inferences revealed that average TOI and post-sprint TOI were likely to be higher in the WBCG condition. Figure 4 displays typical TOI responses in the control WBCG condition across the PHIIE protocol from a single representative subject. Discussion. The purpose of the current investigation was to examine the performance and physiological effects of wearing WBCG during a team sport-specific PHIIE simulation. To date, limited research has reported on the effect of wearing WBCG on simulated team sport match play, and little is known about their effect on the intermittent exercise. From the present study, with a moderate strength effect, a likely benefit of wearing WBCG was observed in total distance covered during LIA, and variable self-selected high-intensity running speed. In combination with those physical benefits, a likely increase was observed in both average and post-sprint TOI in the WBCG condition. Although limited data are available to demonstrate a strong relationship between increased TOI and physical performance, it may be likely that this remains physiological mechanism associated with responsible for the likely performance benefits observed. The likely increase in total distance covered and distance covered during LIA in the WBCG contrasts previous work that has investigated the effects of WBCG on intermittent exercise performance. Duffield and Portis reported no significant effect on 3 different WBCGs on total distance covered or sprint ability in 10 amateur cricket players during a 30-minute intermittent running protocol. Similarly, Higgins et al. Reported no significant effect on lower body CG on total LIA distance covered. However, the intermittent protocols in these studies may have underestimated the frequency of HIA bouts during field-based team sports. Further, these studies may not have been related target speeds for all movement categories assessed that may have reduced the accuracy of distance measures and consistency of LIA movements. The increase in HIA frequency in the present study further highlights the possibility of faster anaerobic recovery in WBCG condition. The faster recovery may be a result of more active recovery, increased LIA speed between the HIA bouts, which may help explain the increased distance covered across the protocol. Further, the increase in LIA distance may possibly be related to the previously reported improvements in energy efficiency at low intensity speeds from wearing only lower body CG. Previous research has suggested that distance covered during field-based team sports is positively correlated to competition level and increases in physiological capacities. Therefore, the observed likely increase in LIA movements has specific implications to team sport performance, as it is suggested that players may remain continuously active when not undertaking bouts of HIA. Burgess et al. Have put forward that continual movement during a soccer match allows players to create more opportunities for attack plays and reduce player density on the field. Further, Bangsbo suggests that team sport athletes likely compromise the LIA volume across a match to assist passively recovery between HIA bouts. However, previous research suggests that active recovery rather than passive recovery increases time to exhaustion during intermittent exercise. This further supports the notion that wearing WBCG during PHIIE allows quicker recovery after bouts of HIA, although an improved ability to complete LIA. The observation that wearing WBCG speeds anaerobic recovery after HIA bouts also lends itself to the hypothesis. Therefore, the present data are the first to suggest that wearing WBCGs may improve physical performance during team sport-specific PHIIE, and further investigation may be required to examine if this remains relevant to actual team sport performance. Separately, the present data demonstrated that wearing WBCG did not increase HIA distance covered or PSS across PHIIE protocol. This finding is in contrast with that of Higgins et al., who reported that wearing CGs provided increases in HIA distance during a netball-specific field protocol. Again, the protocol used by Higgins et al. May have underestimated the HIA demands of team sports and failed to use relative target speeds for all movement categories within the simulation. This may have exaggerated the effects of CGs on PHIIEs. The present study used a valid and team sport-specific pattern of HIAs that was relative to each participant's PSS. The present study identified no effect on WBCG on sprinting performance, a result that is likely supported by past research. Nevertheless, a likely benefit of wearing WBCG was observed in self-selected high-intensity running speeds across the PHIIE protocol. This suggests that WBCG increased the self-selected high-intensity running speed, which may reflect the previously identified reductions in muscle oscillation during dynamic movements while wearing CGs. Investigators have speculated that such reductions in oscillation may assist with enhancement of technique during HIA and also minimizing fatigue. Alternatively, the increase in self-paced HIA running speeds may reflect the circulatory and oxygenation changes without the wearing of WBCG. During repetitive HIA, there is reported reduction in glycolytic rate within the working muscle that may reduce the ability to maintain energy provision during the repeat bouts of HIA. In this present study, the wearing of WBCG may have slowed or decreased this reduction in glycolytic rate through improvements in anaerobic waste removal and or improved oxygen availability as demonstrated by past and present data. The present study is the first to report on the muscle oxygenation response during team sport-specific PHIIE while wearing WBCG. Wearing WBCGs demonstrated a likely increase in average and post-sprint TOI across the PHIIE protocol. This supports previous research that has reported similar effects of wearing CGs on muscle oxygenation trends during low-intensity walking in clinical patients and well-trained cyclists across a 1-hour time trial. Investigators have reported that the circulatory benefits associated with wearing CGs are responsible for such increases in muscle oxygenation. Nevertheless, previous findings have suggested that similar increases in oxygen availability to the working muscle may minimize the progression of muscular fatigue during intense intermittent exercise, either as a result of enhanced anaerobic recovery or a minimized anaerobic energy contribution at the onset of HIA bout. As such, wearing CGs may help to improve oxygen availability within peripheral musculature during PHIIE, helping to speed the reoxygenation of the depleted oxyhemoglobin and oxymyoglobin stores, and in turn enhance metabolic recovery after bouts of HIA. Further, wearing WBCGs appeared to improve regional blood flow within the peripheral muscles, which may help improve anaerobic waste removal. However, the physiological benefits that result from wearing WBCGs appear limited to changes in circulatory and oxygenation responses within the peripheral musculature, because no significant effect was observed in VO2 or blood-lactate responses during the intermittent exercise. In contrast, a significant increase in VO2 has been reported with the wearing of CGs. However, this was only during steady-state running at 12 kilometers an hour. Therefore, wearing WBCGs appeared to improve the metabolic environment within peripheral muscles during team sport-specific PHIIE. However, these benefits were not observed in global measures of exercise intensity and efficiency. In the present study, HR was observed to significantly increase with time across the PHIIE protocol with the wearing of WBCG. Investigators have suggested that the circulatory benefits associated with wearing CGs include improving venous return, subsequently increasing stroke volume and cardiac output, hence lowering HR. Nevertheless, previous research has reported minor increases in skin temperature, 1.5 through 2 degrees Celsius, during intermittent exercise protocols when wearing CGs. These findings indicate that the heat loss capacity of peripheral muscle may be reduced while wearing CGs, as no such effect has been observed in core temperature. As a result, HR may have potentially increased the present study as a result of cardiovascular drift in response to impaired thermoregulation responses. Such a thermoregulatory effect may potentially alter the superficial blood flow responses within peripheral muscles, although past investigations have reported that NIRS measures are significantly affected by large increases in muscle temperature. around 41 degrees Celsius. No data have reported any effect during exercise with the wearing of CGs under typical temperatures, such as those reported by Horton et al., around 27 to 30 degrees Celsius. Furthermore, the increase in muscle temperature because of energy metabolism, thermoregulation, and other processes are not separately identifiable, and therefore it is difficult to suggest whether the increased regional blood flow responses cause blood pooling within the peripheral muscle as a result of an impaired heat loss capacity or an improved blood flow to the muscle. Therefore, future research should be directed at identifying the direct cause of increased blood flow responses with the wearing of WBCGs by counteracting any thermoregulatory effects. The present study has reported a number of performance and physiological benefits of wearing WBCGs during team sport-specific PHIIE, with a small number of practical limitations. Firstly, the PHIIE protocol is not directly an indicator of team sport performance because it fails to assess skill, tactical considerations, or the energy cost of performing unorthodox maneuvers. Additionally, the present study focused on regional muscle oxygenation changes in one agonist muscle of the running action, the lateralis, vastus lateralis. Although this muscle processes a primary role in running, other synergistic muscles, medial gastrocnemius, have been observed to display varied oxygenation responses. Furthermore, given the greatest external compression is applied at the ankle, the effects of CG on muscle oxygenation responses may differ across the compression gradient. As such, future research should investigate the effects of wearing WBCGs on actual team sport match play performance and examine the muscle oxygenation responses at various segments across the limb under graduated compression. In conclusion, the present data demonstrated that wearing WBCG likely increased the total distance covered during a team sport-specific PHIIE protocol. This benefit resulted from an improved ability to cover distance through LIA between the repeated bouts of HIA. This improvement in distance covered was concomitant with higher muscle oxygenation levels observed in the WBCG condition. This relationship may suggest that the anaerobic energy contribution and or anaerobic recovery was minimized and quickened respectively. Past research has suggested that such improvements in distance covered during team sport match play may be related to improvements in performance or desirable tactical strategies. Therefore, wearing WBCGs appear to be beneficial to the PHIIE performance and may offer possible physiological benefits that require further investigation. Practical applications. There were three main practical applications of the findings of this current study. A. Wearing WBCG is likely to increase the total distance covered during team sport match play. B. This is likely to the result of an increased distance covered throughout low-intensity activities, walking, jogging across a match, and wearing WBCGs change the muscle oxygenation response of lower limb muscles, which may help to minimize fatigue across match play. These findings support the wearing of WBCGs throughout the team sport match play or PHIIE because of improvements in distance covered may be beneficial with regard to tactical plans and speeding recovery between bouts of HIA. Therefore, coaches, sports scientists, and athletes associated with team sport may implement the wearing of WBCG during training and competition and take advantage of these demonstrated benefits. Acknowledgements. The authors would like to acknowledge Skins Trademark Compression Garments for their contribution of product in kind and Central Queensland University for their financial support. Also, they would like to acknowledge Mr. Gregory Capron for his technical assistance throughout the study.